So today, folks, we are going to be talking all about training, and for this example I've loaded up a Norwich City save I've had on the go in my spare time, and yeah, we're going to go through how individual training is set up here. I want to cover training of roles, focuses of individual attributes, traits, player personalities, and also taking control of youth training. I feel like this is an aspect of the game that can feel super duper intimidating and you don't really go near it if you're a new player. It's easier just to pretend it doesn't exist, and when you get the news inbox item saying training's going well, you just give yourself a congratulatory pat on the back. But we're going to take control of it today. Today we are going to try and understand the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are just these three boxes here. It's not that scary, everyone. It's not that scary. And in fact, this individual training screen that came in last year is honestly one of my favourite screens in the game. It's super duper useful. And from here, we can basically have a good look at all the players who are currently in the squad, how they're training, what they're training in, and, you know, where they are improving as well, as you can see here. Anyway, before we get into this, I do want to just show a couple of little things that maybe more experienced players will know, but newer players won't know. If you hold shift and click, you can select multiple players just to look at their training focuses all from this screen really quickly. That's something that's useful to be aware of. Another thing that is useful to be aware of is that if we come here and just click on any attribute, it will take you directly to the development screen of that player. And from here, you can look at the attribute development of any player over any period of time you want. I feel like this stuff is a little hidden away. If you're a newer player, you might not be able to spot it. If we take a look at Max Addons here, you can see how he has developed over the first 18 months of this save game. Yeah, it turns out he's pretty good. And well, you know what? Let's use Max as the example today. What I will say is, as you can see, all the arrows are still left on all time. If we put them back to last month, it all reverts back. So yes, let's talk about these three areas of training in relation to Max Addons, shall we? So within your individual training, there are three options. You have your position / role / duty. You have an additional focus and the intensity level. Now, the intensity level I tend to leave on automatic. That is what it'll be on by default. It'll have this nice little circle here to know what that default is. If you come to the rest tab here, depending on a player's conditioning, it will alter how intense their training is. During pre-season, and if I just have a big gap in games, sometimes I may put players on double intensity if there are no matches being played, but for the most part, what the game has by default is quite good here. Occasionally I will choose manually to rest players between games. You can do that by just right-clicking on a player, training, rest, and then give them a few days off if you so wish. And that can be useful for conditioning players who have maybe had a hell of a lot of games in quick succession and you know that you might need in the very near future. So anyway, you can see now he's on this rest. Let's get rid of the rest. Get his normal intensity. Back to training you come, Max, because we've got work to do. So let's talk about position, role and duty training first. So this is one of the areas of the game that really isn't communicated very well, because in Football Manager, there is no such thing as role familiarity. I know, that seems mad. I know that for a lot of people, they got confused this year when the circles vanished. If you played previous Football Managers, you know, there's the little circle. And I think a lot of people took that as kind of gospel, that was somehow players' familiarity in the role they were playing. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. When we are training a player in a role, what we are actually training them in is the attributes related to that role. So, for example, if I train Max as a fullback on defend, the attributes highlighted here, they are what's been focused on. Nothing else is being worked on other than if it's highlighted in individual focus, which for now we will set to none. So, for example, with Max Addons here, I may choose that I want to train him to play complete wing-back, and you may have noticed that is what I've currently got him trained in. The reason for doing that is fairly simple. I want him to have his kind of training time dedicated to all of the attributes that you can see here. Training roles that involve more attributes obviously means that the individual focus on each attribute is more diluted. So, for example, he won't have as much concentration on, say, his tackling, being trained as a complete wing-back, as he might if he was just playing full-back on defend, where there's far fewer things selected. Additionally, of course, this doesn't have to be the role that the player plays within a system. Now, actually, in this example, it is. Max Addons plays as a complete wing-back on support in my system, but ultimately, because of the role that I'm trying to get him tailored towards, I want him to cover all of these bases. Another player that we could look at real quick within my squad is... who should we go for? Let's go for Eze. So Eze here naturally plays on the left, naturally plays down the middle, and he is accomplished out on the right. Currently, I am training him to play as a trequartista out on the right wing, which is the player role that I use in that area of the pitch, but the reason I put him on trequartista is because I want to focus on stuff like his finishing and first touch. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, I decided, actually Eze, although you're playing as a trequartista, you're out in the wide areas, I think you need to be able to put in the ball. I'd have two options. I could change his additional focus to be on crossing, and as you can see here, it's now highlighted blue because it's having a focus. Or alternatively, I could change the role that he has been training in. So, for example, we could change him to... would inverted winger wouldn't be a good one? Would inverted winger be a good one? It would be a good one if we just remove the additional focus. You can see here, now crossing is being focused on in his training, and, well, unfortunately for him, finishing less so. And what you can basically do here is pick a role to cover a player's weakness. So, for example, looking at Eze here, he is potentially a centre attacking mid who doesn't have the best speed or physicals. They could be a little bit better. So one of the best roles that I will train a centre attacking mid in is as a shadow striker. And the reason I like the shadow striker role, even if I'm not using it myself, is I think it covers a lot of the really good areas for a centre attacking mid. In general, including, of course, the physicals, which is where we want a lot of TLC here. I want him focusing on his pace and acceleration. Wouldn't mind him having a little bit more of a turn of pace. From here, we could set an additional focus of pace and acceleration if we wanted to help out. But given the fact he is playing a more playmaking role, perhaps passing would be better. And of course, you can mouse over any of the individual attributes here to see what attributes will be affected by this type of training. So for example here, we've now got more focus on vision, and because he is training both as a shadow striker and his passing is getting a little bit more attention than anything else because it's covered by both aspects of his training. And when it comes to basically picking a player's role, you're trying to pick the role that makes the most sense for them. So with a very young forward that I have in my team right now, Matías Arezzo, he is very good at kind of an advanced playmaker role. In fact, you'd probably say he is an advanced playmaker just at a glance here. But if we look at his training, I'm currently training him to play as a complete forward on the attack. And the reason I'm doing that is he is super talented, he's super young, and I want him to potentially try and improve his jumping reach, strength, his passing, his vision and teamwork, which aren't areas which, if we just look, are covered by him playing as an advanced forward. An advanced forward is a lot more focused into areas he's already good at. But because I'm trying to make him more complete, because he's really young and I think he's got the potential to play as a more complete forward, that is where we're training him. And there isn't really a right or way to approach this. Some people would say focus on his strengths, keep him doing what he does best. For me personally, I like a striker, and particularly within my longer term vision for how I'd like to play at the club, I would like a striker who can come deep for the ball, does have a bit of teamwork, does have a bit of vision, can be a creative outlet. So for this younger player, it makes more sense for him to be trained as a complete forward. Now, another thing worth considering is training players in new positions. There is a hidden attribute which impacts the effectiveness of that, and that hidden attribute is called versatility. Versatility is basically how quickly a player can learn a new position and how a player can cover multiple positions. So, for example, with Eze here, before I started messing around with the training, we were training him to play out on the right wing, which, as you can see here, he has already accomplished that, but because I see that being his long-term position in the team, I would like him to become natural in it. So in training him to play out on the right mid as a trequartista, he is improving in this area. Now he's already at an accomplished level, which is the second highest level of effectiveness. In order to get him to natural, we are going to need to keep him training here, but additionally, giving him game time as a right attacking mid will help him on his way that little bit quicker. And in fact, if we look at his form here, you can see that he has played a handful of games in the last kind of 20 or so games that I've had, out on the right wing playing as the trequartista, as well as playing more down the middle when he absolutely needs to. And so when it comes to training a player in a new position, you basically want to, take into consideration a few different factors. The first is, does he have the attributes to play that position? So let's look at Daramy here. Does he have the attributes to say, let's say, for the sake of argument, I decided I want to play Daramy as a right wing back. I would never actually do this, but this is just, we're doing an exception here. So I'd look at him and go, right, he's got the pace, he's got the physicals. Can he do it defensively? No, not really. But if we just have a quick peek, let's just see. Could he do it? Could he do it? I mean, if we look at him as a complete wing back, he's pretty good in some areas, but his tackling is lacking. And of course, one of the downsides of tackling is there isn't an individual focus for tackling. It's one of the weird ones which just isn't covered, and knowing what attributes are and aren't covered by different kind of individual focuses is something that's worth knowing in itself. Tackling is one of the few that isn't really going to work. So in this example, you know what, Darren, I'm sorry, mate, you're not playing as a wing-back. Let's go find someone else to turn into a wing-back. Let's go with Scott McTominay, who's actually quite an interesting example here, because currently I'm training him to play centre-back, everyone. Yes, I did it at Manchester United in our Let's Play. I'm also doing it at Norwich City, where I've managed to sign him up. And there's a few considerations that went into deciding whether or not to play McTominay as a centre-back. Now, naturally, if you're going to drastically change how a player features in a team and train them in a whole new role they have no familiarity with, the best time to do it is as early as possible. And we'll talk more about this shortly. But for me personally, I take control of my individual training that you see here for my under 18s, for my under 20s, no matter what. And it does give me a little bit extra in the way of workload to do, an extra thing to keep an eye on. But the long-term benefits of it are huge, because if I have a young player come through the academy who plays, say, out on the wing, and I think actually you'd be a better striker, I have the ability to retrain them in that area. So, for example, if we just look at someone like Stuani here, I look at Stuani here, who has only recently joined us. And he is naturally a centre mid who can play centre attacking mid and right mid. So he probably has a little bit of versatility about him because he can play a few different positions. We can see here he's got the versatility, and he's quite a technical player. When I look at him, I don't see a centre mid or a right mid here. I'm going to be completely honest. I just don't think he's good enough defensively. He's got 7 marking, 8 tackling. It's not my kind of player. 10 decisions. What I look at when I see this polygon is potential striker. So let's have a look at this here. I am making a very early call on this guy. He is only 18 years old, and because I've picked him up early in the under 23s, I have gone, you know what? You'd make a really good advance forward. And in fact, when we look at it here, balance and decisions of 10, and everything else is above 10. If we compare that to the centre mid role, let's go with advanced playmaker, which is allegedly his best role. You can see here, he is a pretty good advanced playmaker, to be fair, but I still like a player to have a little bit of defensive capability about him. And even, box to box. Could he do a job? Maybe, but box to boxes are quite demanding. I like my midfielders to be able to tackle. Long and short of it is, I don't think he's a midfielder. I think he's an advanced forward. Now, this is quite a big decision to make, because when you train a player in a whole new position, they have no familiarity in whatsoever. They will start to learn this position, but it will limit their ability overall as a footballer. In Football Manager, players have something called current ability, and they have a potential ability as well. But current ability is a bit like an overall rating. It's a rating out of 200 that's hidden in the back end. There's basically, how good is this player? And what makes up the current ability are all these attributes you can see here. And depending on a player's kind of position, what attributes are weighed into the current ability varies. So, for example, for a centre mid, 11 finishing eats up less of that current ability than, say, a striker who has really good finishing. A defender with 20 tackling, that would use up more of their current ability than a striker who has really good tackling, because the tackling isn't considered important. So what this indirectly means is that if you train a player to play a load of different positions, it's going to limit actually how good they can become. The more versatile a player is, the less of a specialist they will become in any one position, and the less good they can become in that singular position. So that is something worth considering. With someone like Ernesto Stuani here, I think he's a good centre mid, but I feel like he's always going to be limited a little bit. And when I look at him, I think he could be a really, really good advance forward. He's good enough, he's young enough, he's got the potential as well, so I'm quietly confident he can pull it off. And so in this instance here, you know what? I'm going to train him to play as a striker. But when it comes to training players in whole new positions, really do just consider, is there a role I can salvage the player into? In this case with Stuani, maybe I could look to play him as an advanced playmaker, or maybe train him to be a bit better defensively. Maybe he's young enough that if I decided to train him as a ball-winning midfielder, I could get that marking and tackling up. Maybe the bravery, concentration. Not a big fan of his decision, so maybe I decide as well that we're going to go with defensive positioning as well, just to get even more focus on things. Maybe I leave him like this, and he can become a better rounded centre mid. With this kind of player, if I was going to go down this route of trying to make him much better defensively, I'd probably give him 3 to 6 months of this kind of training, and see what becomes of him. See if the marking and tackling does start to improve. If it doesn't, in my opinion, it makes more sense to retrain his position or train him in a position and role that makes sense for the attributes he has. Be that to go down perhaps the less risky route of an advanced playmaker on attack. Even then, there's a few areas of his game that I'd like to see be a bit better, like his anticipation decisions especially. Or alternatively, go, what, mate, going back to the drawing board, advanced playmaker is your calling. I think this suits your game really well. And there isn't really a right or wrong way to do this. I can show you a few examples of how I've got other players set up. But essentially, you're playing to their strengths in terms of the roles you're going to train them in, and you're using the roles to cover the areas you need to improve. So, for example, for Brais Mendes here, right now I've got him training as a trequartista with a focus on agility and balance. He does play it out on the right. As you can see here, this guy is quite far along, Mendes. He's in the first team, and at the age of 24, he's well-rounded in the areas I want him to be rounded in. At this point, we are really trying to make him the best specialist possible. So we've got agility and balance. His balance of 10, I just wish was a little bit better. And of course, a trequartista is the role we play within the team. He's not actually being trained in trequartista because he plays there. It's simply because they are the attributes that I need him to be best in. And as you can see, with the exception of his balance, he's pretty good in all areas. If there was one area that you thought maybe you could do a bit better in, it might be attacking movement, just to help with the anticipation, decisions, and off the ball. Or alternatively, I look at that composure a little bit. Maybe final third is the option. Of course, I appreciate when you're new to the game, being able to glance at a player and know exactly what individual focuses you have to cover those weaknesses does perhaps become a little bit more difficult. Quite an interesting player actually is Yunus Musa here, who as you can see is developing really, really nicely for me. I managed to pick him up for 2.5 million. Thank you, Valencia. That was a very good deal at the time. So you can see with Musa here, I am training him as a roaming playmaker. This guy is the ultimate kind of jack of all trades, master of none. He plays a whole host of positions really, really well. In fact, you can see looking across everything, he's barely got any attributes below 10. So with that in mind, I am just training him to play roaming playmaker. We are just trying to make him as well-rounded as possible. He's at a point where I don't even think there's an individual focus that I want to put him on. Maybe I could focus on his crossing or his finishing if I really wanted to. But because he's kind of got 13s, 14s and 12s in everything, rather than have an additional focus, I'd rather he put all his effort into just improving in all of this stuff equally. And, should a certain attribute lag behind, maybe its passing and vision don't improve, in the next couple of months, then I might look to just put him on passing, individual training, just to help cover off those kind of gaps in his games. So anyway, we've talked a little bit about retraining in a position. We've talked about the idea of covering weaknesses. One thing that you might encounter is players complaining in training. It happens. They'll complain about the level of fitness training or whatever. It happens all the time. They might complain about their individual focus. It's not having any effect. In fact, if we just go to dynamics and happiness, is anyone unhappy with their training right now? Right. Scott McTominay is training. He feels like the individual training that he has been set on is not producing any results. And the same with Ben Godfrey, who I managed to sign back to Norwich. Let's have a look at McTominay. We've already looked at you, Scott. So Scott is complaining that his marking and positioning are not benefiting him. He thinks his individual focus is a waste of time. Now, I disagree. We're training him to play centre-back, right? And the issue we have is that his marking and marking and positioning are very, very poor. As I mentioned, this guy's great. McTominay's great because he's got such good tackling, and I can't focus on his tackling, but I can focus on the other kind of defensive weaknesses in his game in terms of his decisions, marking and positioning. You can see at a glance, just with all the attributes for a ball-playing defender highlighted, these are clearly the areas of the game that he is lacking. They are clearly the things that I need him to focus in. Now, he is complaining about them. He doesn't think they're producing any results. And what I would say about this is a bit of an example by example case. But if we just look at his development here, there has been little bits of improvement as of late, and there is steady progress being made. Now, when a player complains like this, there's kind of two options you can do. You could just remove the individual focus, maybe temporary, maybe forever. But in this example with McTominay, where his training rating is still really good, and he is still improving overall as a player, it's not massively detrimenting his performances. His training rating isn't poor. I'm just going to stick him with it. And, sometimes it can be worth just removing a player off the focus for a short period of time Other times like this one, I'm just going to ignore him. I'm going to praise him for his training because he's done well. He's got a good training rating. And in praising him, it's going to help his morale, hopefully help his performances on the pitch, and in turn help his training rating, which is I believe a combination of kind of player morale and also how much they're actually developing in training. And you can see, looking for our team here, we have got a few players who are a little bit concerned about their kind of training, although not too many. And if we just actually look at training as a whole, you might have seen here with the individual kind of players, the training ratings are really high across the board. And when players are training well, do make sure to praise them. You can see here, Ben Godfrey, he had a concern, didn't he? He was concerned. He feels his individual training is not, producing any results. Let's go and look at Ben. Ben, what are we training you in, mate? We're training you in your strength. Now, I'm going to tell you now, his strength and jumping reach are on the rise. He is improving as a player, and actually, as you can see here, he is improving on the whole. You may also notice there are some attributes here outside of what we're training him in that are improving. They are as a result of the team training. And whilst this will happen from time to time, it's very rare that it happens like it has here, to be fair. But yes, Ben Godfrey, he's not happy with his training. He's not happy with his strength training. Let's have a quick peek here. And you can see here, you can click on the attributes you want to look at. So if we just look at his strength and his jumping reach training, he's been on it for the last 6 months since he joined the club. When he joined, they were both at 13. They have both already increased to 14. So despite the fact he thinks they're not getting any results, he's putting in good performances on the pitch. His training rating is still really good. I'm not going to remove that additional focus. If it gets to a point where his training rating really starts to struggle, or maybe for a few months they don't improve and I can't see any sign of improvement, perhaps even they start to drop, then I might choose to remove it. I know that's something that comes up quite a lot. Now, one thing I haven't talked about here is player traits. I feel like these deserve their whole own video. So if that is something you would like to see, please do let me know. Essentially, player traits allow you in both younger players and older players to help them play to their strengths, or if a player has a weakness in their game, maybe they're not good at dribbling with the ball, maybe their passing range isn't particularly good for their position. Player traits can help basically impact their decision-making, their behaviour on the pitch to, make sure that those weaknesses aren't exposed. Or on the flip side, if a player's really good, if they're really great at dribbling, really quick, you might have to train them in certain, instructions, be that runs down the wing or knocks a ball past opponent, as you can see with Ben Godfrey here, to help players make the most of the strengths that they're quite good at. Of course, some of these are better suited to certain positions, more so than others. Anyway, the one last thing I want to talk about is player personalities, and this, again, probably deserves its own little video, but I want to mention it here. There are 3 attributes that go into player development and how they approach training. Those are ambition, determination, and professionalism. Now, obviously, determination you can see on a player just by clicking on them. In Musa's case here, you can see his determination is 14. And, well, when it comes to personalities, these are what will reveal a player's professionalism and ambition. So, for example, Musa here is fairly professional. These are the Holy Trinity. These are the only 3 attributes which impact how a player approaches training, and they all 3 kind of interact equally. So if you have a player who's super determined, super ambitious, and super professional, well, firstly, you're extremely lucky. Secondly, he will probably naturally develop a lot better in training than, a very similar player who's of a similar ability, similar potential, but just doesn't have the same kind of personalities. So if you have, a player who lacks determination or isn't ambitious, maybe they're unambitious, that is a personality that comes up from time to time, they are going to be less likely to develop well and feel the benefits of training. And in fact, if we just look here at my squad profile view, have we got anyone who is undetermined? In fact, we've got a fair few players who are unambitious here. So, for example, although these players don't have a great deal of kind of ability, someone like David Cutler, who is unambitious in personality and has poor determination, is not going to develop well. I mean, that's the sad reality of it. And whilst we can try mentoring or tutoring, don't be dissuaded. Don't feel like your individual training isn't working if you're trying to use it on a player who isn't, a particularly, great player in terms of their determination, professionalism, and ambition. Anyway, the one final thing to say is that players do need game time to develop. I will talk more about this in maybe some follow-up videos if people would like to see them talking about when to loan out youngsters. Maybe we can take a closer look at a set of youngsters, what I do with them on a case-by-case basis. I feel like with this kind of video, the best way to communicate things is to show you examples of it in action, which is why we've got this save game that's midway through. So yeah, if that's something that you would like to see, please do let me know. But game time is important equally. In loaning out a player, you lose control of, a player's training, and you just can't, micromanage it to the same degree we can here. So very often, I wouldn't loan out a player if they've got glaring weaknesses in their game that you're desperate to solve while they're younger, because players who are younger will naturally improve. Just one final thing to mention is that when it comes to technicals, mentals, and physicals, these all act slightly differently. Physicals, obviously, they do improve in younger players quite drastically, but for a lot of players, you're either born with good physicals or you don't have good physicals. A player isn't going to become the world's greatest sprinter if they were born slow. Mentals tend to naturally develop over time, whilst you can focus on them through role training and also through additional focuses. To a similar degree to physicals, players, might be naturally born an intelligent footballer. Equally, over the years, as they perhaps, get into their 30s, their late 20s, start to decline in their technicals and physicals, their mentals will naturally rise because they are more experienced. And when it comes to technicals, they are perhaps the easiest thing to improve throughout a player's career. And in younger players, they are quite malleable. You can definitely improve, technicals by easily 7 or 8. Kind of plus in terms of an increase that you can get on a youngster if you're training them in the certain areas, if you juggle their training correctly and such. But anyway, I hope this video was useful. I realised that I've kind of gone into way more depth than I wanted to again here, but with these guide videos, I feel like it's important to just cover all the main bits and pieces. What I would say is if you have enjoyed this video, please do drop a like on it. It massively helps me out. It helps the YouTube algorithm, encourages me to do more videos like this one. A couple of days ago, we did a guide all about tactics in Football Manager. So if you would like to see that one, make sure to check it out after you finish watching this. And well, until next time, I hope you learned something new. It is me, Jack, and I'll talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.